Commander Zarvik knew he was in trouble the moment the warning lights flashed across his control panel. His small scout ship shuddered violently as it dropped out of faster-than-light travel near the outer edges of an uncharted solar system. This was supposed to be a simple survey mission, but now red emergency symbols blinked everywhere around him. "Computer, status report," Zarvik said, his four-fingered hands moving quickly across the controls. "Main propulsion system failure? Secondary systems failing. Power core unstable." The ship's computer responded in a calm voice that contrasted sharply with the dire situation. Zarvik checked the navigation system. His ship was being pulled toward the third planet of this system, a blue and green world that looked peaceful from a distance. But Zarvik knew better. He quickly searched the galactic database and felt his heart sink. This planet was classified as extreme hazard, a death world. "Computer, engage emergency landing protocols. Aim for lowest population density area," he ordered. Strapping himself securely into his safety harness, the ship plummeted through the atmosphere, trailing fire and smoke. Zarvik watched through the viewport as the ground rushed up to meet him. Dense forests, mountains, and lakes growing larger by the second. The ship's outer hull glowed red-hot from the friction of entry, with a deafening crash. The scout ship plowed through a line of tall trees and slammed into the earth, sliding, nearly half a mile before coming to rest in a small clearing. The impact threw Zarvik against his restraints, nearly knocking him unconscious. When the dust settled, he hung in his harness, dazed but alive. Outside, birds had gone silent, startled by the violent arrival of something foreign to their world. "Computer, life support status?" Zarvik asked, his voice weak. "Life support functioning at minimal capacity. External atmosphere analysis, nitrogen-oxygen mix, high water content, numerous biological contaminants. Warning, external conditions rated hazardous to Zentari physiology." Zarvik carefully unstrapped himself and moved gingerly around the cabin. Nothing seemed broken, but he would have bruises later. He checked the ship's systems one by one, confirming his worst fears. The communication array was damaged beyond repair with his limited tools. The engine was completely destroyed, and the power core had only enough energy for basic functions. For about 30 Earth days, he was stranded on a Deathworld. Zarvik accessed the information about this planet from the ship's database. Earth, as the locals called it, was infamous throughout the galaxy. Its high gravity made its dominant species, humans, naturally stronger than most galactic citizens. Its varied and extreme weather patterns had forced its life forms to become incredibly adaptable. Its evolutionary history had produced an alarming number of venomous creatures, aggressive predators and microscopic pathogens, but most concerning were the humans themselves. The database classified them as violently curious omnivores with pack tendencies. They were known to eat almost anything, could survive injuries that would kill most species, and had a history of constant warfare among themselves. The database strongly advised avoiding contact at all costs. "Great," Zarvik muttered to himself. "Of all the planets to crash on." He gathered his emergency survival kit and put on his environmental protection suit. The suit would shield him from Earth's atmosphere, which his species considered toxic due to its high oxygen content and countless microorganisms. He checked his universal translator, hoping it would work if he encountered humans. Then he cautiously opened the emergency hatch and took his first steps onto Earth. The forest around him was eerily quiet after the crash. Broken trees marked the path of his ship's landing. The gravity pulled at him uncomfortably, about 20% stronger than his homeworld. Zarvik activated his scanner and detected no immediate signs of human presence. That was good. He needed time to assess the damage to his ship properly and formulate a survival plan. As Zarvik circled his damaged vessel, he realized how dire his situation truly was. The ship would never fly again without major repairs, which were impossible without proper facilities. His best hope was to repair the communication array enough to send a distress signal to any Zentari vessels that might pass through this sector. But that could take weeks or even months. He would need to find water, establish a secure perimeter around his ship, and remain hidden from the dangerous natives. According to his training, even a single human could overpower him in his weakened state. Their curious nature meant they would certainly investigate the crash, possibly capturing him for study or worse. Zarvek shuddered at the thought. He had heard stories of other explorers who had encountered humans. The tales rarely ended well. As the aliens surveyed the crash site, he failed to notice the small device attached to a nearby tree, a wildlife camera that had captured his ship's descent and his emergence from the wreckage, miles away. Forest Ranger Alan Carter sat in his truck, eating a sandwich when his phone buzzed. The wildlife monitoring system had detected unusual activity. He tapped the notification and nearly choked on his lunch when he saw the images of what looked like a fiery object crashing through the forest. What in the world? Alan muttered, zooming in on the blurry images. The system had registered it as a possible small aircraft crash. As the only ranger on duty in this remote area, it was his responsibility to investigate and offer assistance to any survivors. Alan put his truck in gear and headed toward the coordinates, unaware that he was about to make first contact with a being from another world, one who viewed him as a deadly predator to be feared and avoided at all costs. As he drove, Alan radioed in the potential emergency. "Dispatch, this is Ranger Carter. I've got what looks like a small plane down in Sector 7. I'm heading to investigate now. Might need emergency services." "Copy that, Ranger Carter. Be careful out there. Backup is at least 40 minutes away." Alan ended the call and pressed the gas pedal harder. If someone had crashed, every minute could be crucial. Little did he know that this routine call would change his life, and potentially the relationship between Earth and the rest of the galaxy forever. Meanwhile, Zarvek had set up basic perimeter sensors around his ship and was attempting to repair the communication array when his own sensors alerted him to an approaching vehicle. His heart raced with fear as he realized a human was coming. "Already?" he whispered to himself. "That's faster than expected." Zarvek gathered his defensive tools and retreated into the ship. He would observe this human first, assess the threat, and then determine the best course of action. His survival training was clear. On a Deathworld like Earth, take no chances. Alan's truck bounced along the rough forest road as he approached the crash site. Through the trees he could see a trail of broken branches and disturbed earth. Whatever had come down here was bigger than a small plane. He parked his vehicle. When the road became too narrow and continued on foot, his emergency pack slung over his shoulder. "Hello? Anyone there?" "Forest Service," Alan called out as he hiked through the underbrush. The forest had gone strangely quiet. No birds sang, no squirrels darted between trees. Even the insects seemed to have gone silent. It was the kind of stillness that followed something unnatural. Meanwhile, inside the damaged scout ship, Zarvek watched the humans approach on his security monitors. The alien's pulse quickened as he observed Alan moving confidently through the forest. According to his database, humans were apex predators on this world, capable of pursuing prey for days without rest. This one appeared to be a scout, perhaps for a larger hunting party. "Computer, analyze human threat level," Zarvek whispered. "Subject appears to be male adult human. Carrying unknown equipment. Physical capabilities exceed Centauri standards by approximately 35% due to higher gravity adaptation. Caution advised." Zarvek checked his defensive stunner. He didn't want to harm the human, but he couldn't allow himself to be captured either. The best option was to remain hidden and hope. The human would leave after a brief investigation. That hope vanished when Alan discovered the crash site. The ranger stopped at the edge of the clearing, his mouth falling open at the sight of the sleek, obviously non-human craft half buried in the soil. This was no airplane or helicopter. The metallic hull had an iridescent quality that shifted colors in the sunlight, and there were no visible wings or rotors. "What the ... Alan muttered, pulling out his phone to take pictures. He approached cautiously, professional training overriding his shock. "Hello? Is anyone hurt? I'm here to help." Inside the ship, Zarvek made a difficult decision. The human had seen the craft and was documenting it. More humans would surely follow. Hiding was no longer an option. He would need to confront this human and somehow convince it that he posed no threat. Perhaps he could persuade the human to help him instead of alerting its pack.zar single quotes VK activated his universal translator, adjusted his environmental suit, and moved toward the emergency exit. With a deep breath, he opened the hatch. Alan jumped back as a section of the craft slid open. He instinctively reached for his sidearm but stopped himself. Whatever was happening, his job was to help first. He watched, frozen in place as a figure emerged from the ship. Zr single quotes VK stood about 5 feet tall, his environmental suit covering most of his features. But even through the semi-transparent face shield, Alan could see this was no human. The alien had bluish-gray skin, large eyes with vertical pupils, and a mouth that seemed too wide for its face. Four-fingered hands gripped a small device pointed cautiously in Alan's direction. For several long moments, human and alien stared at each other in silence. Then Alan did something that completely confused Zarvek. He slowly raised his empty hands, palms forward, and took a step back. "I'm not going to hurt you," Alan said slowly. "Are you injured? Do you need help?" Zarvek tilted his head, puzzled by this response. The human was showing signs of non-aggression, contradicting everything in his database. The translator processed the English words, struggling with the accent but managing a rough translation. "You ... Zarvek asked, his voice sounding mechanical through the translator. Alan's eyes widened. "It talks," he whispered to himself. Then louder, "No, I won't attack you. I'm a forest ranger. My job is to help." Zarvek kept his distance, the stunner still raised. "Human dangerous, predator species." Alan almost laughed, despite his shock. "Well, I guess technically we are predators, but I'm not dangerous to you. I just want to make sure you're okay." He pointed to the crashed ship. "That looks like a bad landing. Are you hurt?" The translator struggled with some words, but Zarvek understood enough. This human was expressing concern for his well-being. It didn't match anything he'd been taught about Earth's dominant species. "Not injured seriously," Zarvek replied. "Ship damaged, communications broken, stranded on Deathworld." "Deathworld?" Alan repeated, confused. "You mean Earth?" "You think Earth is a Deathworld?" Zarvek nodded. "High gravity, dangerous predators, toxic atmosphere, violent natives." Alan took a moment to process this information. This alien believed Earth was some kind of hostile planet, and humans were violent creatures to be feared. No wonder it seemed so cautious. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," Alan said gently. "Earth can be dangerous, sure, but it's home to billions of us. We're not all violent. Most of us are pretty peaceful, actually." Zarvek lowered his stunner slightly, intrigued by this information. Could the database be wrong, or was this human trying to deceive him? "More humans will come?" Zarvek asked. Dahlin hesitated. He should report this, an actual alien spacecraft and a living extraterrestrial being, but looking at the frightened creature before him, he made a split-second decision. "Not if you don't want them to," he said. "I haven't called anyone yet about what I found, but you can't stay here. Someone else will find this crash site eventually." Zarvek considered his options. His ship was beyond repair. His distress signal might take weeks to reach anyone. And now this human, this supposedly dangerous predator, was offering help. "Where would I go?" Zarvek asked. "I have a cabin about 10 miles from here. It's private, off the grid." "You could stay there while we figure things out," Alan suggested. Still, not quite believing he was having this conversation, Zarvek hesitated. Going with this human could be dangerous. But staying here was certainly dangerous. At least the human seemed non-aggressive. "Need supplies from ship," Zarvek said finally, lowering his stunner completely. Alan nodded. "Take what you need. My truck is parked down the road. We can cover your ship with branches to hide it temporarily." As Zarvek gathered essential equipment from his ship, he wondered if he was making a terrible mistake trusting this human. But something about Alan's behavior suggested he might be an exception to what Zarvek had been taught about humans. Meanwhile, Alan sent a quick text message. To his supervisor, false alarm, just a small meteor. Nothing to report. Then he put his phone away, knowing he had just lied on an official report, and wondering what he had gotten himself into. Neither Alan nor Zarvek noticed the small drone hovering high above the trees, its camera zoomed in on the crash site, transmitting everything to a secure government facility where Dr. Susan Miller watched with growing excitement. The ride to Alan's cabin was tense. Zarvek sat in the passenger seat of the forest ranger's truck, his environmental suit still sealed tight. He clutched his bag of salvaged equipment and watched the landscape pass by with a mixture of fear and wonder. The trees here were so tall, the vegetation so dense and varied. Even through his protective visor, the colors seemed more vivid than anything on his homeworld. "You can relax," Alan said, glancing at his alien passenger. "Nobody comes out this far, we're safe." Zarvek's translator processed the words. Safe was a relative concept on a Deathworld. Why help me? Zarvek asked. The question had been bothering him since they left the crash site. Alan thought for a moment. It's what decent people do. Someone needs help, you help them. Doesn't matter where they're from. He paused. Plus, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't curious. We've always wondered if we were alone in the universe. Not alone, Zarvek replied. Many species, many worlds. Your planet avoided. Too dangerous, Alan chuckled. That's kind of funny, actually. We've been looking for aliens for decades, and it turns out you've all been avoiding us because you think we're scary. Zarvek didn't find it amusing. According to his training, humans often used humor to disarm others before attacking. But this human had had plenty of opportunities to capture or harm him and had done neither. The truck turned onto a narrow dirt road that wound up into the hills. After a few minutes, a small wooden cabin came into view. It was simple but sturdy, with a wide porch and large windows. Beside it sat a shed and what appeared to be a small garden. Home sweet home, Alan said, parking the truck. It's not much, but it's private. No neighbors for miles. As they exited the vehicle, a golden-furred quadruped came bounding around the corner of the cabin, making loud barking sounds. Zarvek reacted instantly, raising his stunner. Whoa, whoa! Alan stepped between Zarvek and the animal. That's just Buck, my dog. He's friendly. He won't hurt you. Zarvek didn't lower his weapon. Predator animal? Guard beast? Well, he's a predator by biology, I guess, but he's a pet. A companion? Alan knelt down and called the dog to him. Buck approached cautiously, sniffing the air in Zarvek's direction. See? He's just curious about you. Zarvek slowly lowered his stunner, fascinated. You keep Predator as ... companion? Yeah, dogs have been with humans for thousands of years. They help us hunt, guard our homes, but mostly they're just good company. Alan scratched behind Buck's ears and the dog's tail wagged happily. Want to try petting him? Zarvek shook his head quickly. One step at a time, inside the cabin, Alan showed Zarvek around the simple living space. A main room with furniture, a small kitchen area, a sleeping room, and a bathing facility. It was rustic by human standards, but seemed incredibly complex. To Zarvek. You can set up your equipment wherever you need to, Alan said. Are you hungry? Can you eat our food? Zarvek shook his head, brought nutrient packs. He hesitated, then added, Need to test atmosphere, suit power limited. Alan nodded. Go ahead. The air's clean up here. With careful movements, Zarvek activated his suit's external sensors and analyzed the cabin's atmosphere. To his surprise, the readings showed no dangerous levels of toxins or pathogens. According to his instruments, the air was actually breathable. For his species, could the database be wrong about this too? Cautiously, Zarvek unsealed his helmet and took a shallow breath. The air was richer than he was used to, with complex scents he couldn't identify, but it didn't seem harmful. After a few minutes with no adverse effects, he removed his helmet completely. Alan tried not to stare at Zarvek's face. The alien had no hair, just smooth bluish-gray skin. His eyes were large and violet-colored with vertical pupils that adjusted to the light. His nose was flat with 3 small nostrils, and his ears were just slight depressions on the sides of his head. Atmosphere tolerable, Zarvek announced, sounding surprised. Not as toxic as reported. That's good news, Alan replied. What else did your reports get wrong about Earth? Before Zarvek could answer, a small device in his pack began to beep. He quickly retrieved it, a compact scanner that was picking up an energy signature. Detection device, he explained to Alan. Something watching us, Alan frowned. Like what? Satellites? No, closer, directed energy, scanning technology. Zarvik moved around the cabin, following the signal. There. He pointed to a spot high, on the wall near the ceiling. Alan brought a chair over and climbed up to investigate. Behind a small decorative plate was a tiny camera, no bigger than a button. What the hell? Alan carefully removed the device. Someone's been spying on me. Zarvek took the camera and examined it. Advanced technology, not mine. He looked at Alan with concern. Your government? Alan's face hardened. Maybe, but how would they know to put it here? I've lived alone for years. He began searching the cabin systematically, finding 2 more hidden cameras and a listening device under the kitchen table. While Alan searched, Zarvek set up a small device from his pack. Signal blocker, he explained, will prevent transmission. Alan sat down heavily on his couch, looking troubled. Someone knows about you. They must have been watching the forest with drones or satellites and saw your crash. Now they're watching me too. In a secure government facility 50 miles away, Dr. Susan Miller frowned at her monitors as they all went dark simultaneously. We've lost all feeds from the Carter cabin, a technician reported. Susan nodded thoughtfully. It seems our visitor is more technologically advanced than we anticipated. Prepare a team. We need to make contact before anyone else does. Back at the cabin, Alan and Zarvek sat across from each other at the kitchen table. Night had fallen, and the forest around them was alive with sounds that made Zarvek nervous, hooting owls, chirping insects, and the occasional distant howl. They will come for me, Zarvek said quietly. Your government? They will want my technology, Alan nodded. Probably. But not all humans are the same. Some would want to study you. Others would want to help you. The question is, who finds you first? Zarvek considered this. In my culture, we have a saying, judge a species, not by its weapons, but by how it treats the vulnerable. You helped me when I was vulnerable. That's a good saying, Alan replied. We have similar ones. Zarvek activated his translator's learning function, allowing it to better process English from Alan's speech patterns. Tell me about humans, not from database, real humans. As the night deepened, Alan talked about human history, culture, and daily life. He explained concepts like music, art, and cooking for pleasure rather than just sustenance. Zarvek found it all fascinating, especially the idea that humans spent time on activities with no survival benefit. Why make music? Zarvek asked. No practical purpose. Alan smiled. It feeds something else in us, something besides our bodies. He walked to a shelf and took down an old record player. Here, listen. As the gentle sounds of classical guitar filled the cabin, Zarvek's eyes widened. The complex patterns of sound created strange sensations in his mind. It was pleasant. Neither of them noticed the convoy of black vehicles moving silently through the forest toward the cabin, their headlights off, guided by GPS coordinates. Buck's ears perked up first. The dog lifted his head from his paws and growled softly toward the window. Alan, who had been explaining the concept of sports to Zarvek, immediately fell silent. Something's wrong, Alan whispered, moving to the window. He carefully peered through a gap in the curtains. The moonlight revealed several dark figures moving through the trees toward the cabin. We've got company. Zarvek quickly gathered his equipment. How many? At least 6 that I can see. They're wearing dark clothes, moving like professionals. Alan grabbed his rifle from above the fireplace. Not regular police, probably government agents. Zarvek's translator struggled with some of the terms, but he understood the danger. Need to leave now, Alan nodded. There's a back way out through the cellar. It leads to a trail that only locals know about. He moved quickly to the kitchen and pulled up a concealed trapdoor in the floor. Buck, come. The dog obediently followed as Alan led them down narrow wooden steps into a small cellar. Zarvik descended last, his night vision allowing him to see clearly in the darkness. The cellar was mostly empty except for some stored food and tools. Alan pushed against what looked like a solid wall, revealing a hidden passage. Old bootlegger's tunnel from Prohibition days. The previous owner showed me. Seeing Zarvik's effusion, he added, "I'll explain history later. Right now we need to move." Above them, they heard the cabin door burst open and voices shouting commands. Alan motioned for silence as they slipped into the narrow tunnel. It was barely tall enough for Alan to stand upright, forcing him to hunch slightly. The earthen passage extended into darkness, supported by old wooden beams. They moved as quietly as possible, with Buck leading the way. Behind them, they could hear people searching the cabin, furniture being moved, and angry voices when they discovered the cellar. "They'll find the tunnel soon," Alan whispered. "We need to hurry." After about 100 yards, the tunnel sloped upward and ended at a rusted iron door. Alan pushed it open, revealing the night sky and forest beyond. They emerged on a hillside about a quarter-mile from the cabin. "Where now?" Zarvak asked, looking around at the dark forest. Alan pointed east. "There's an old fire lookout tower. About 3 miles that way. It's been abandoned for years. We can hide there while we figure out our next move." They set off through the woods, moving as quickly as they could while staying quiet. Alan knew these forests well, navigating confidently even in the darkness. Zarvik followed, impressed by the human's ability to move through such difficult terrain with ease. After about an hour of hiking, they heard the distant sound of helicopters. "They're bringing in air support," Alan said grimly. "Your people have anything like helicopters?" "Yes, flying machines." "Not as loud," Zarvik replied. He looked up through the tree canopy at the night sky. "My people will be searching too." "4. You?" Zarvik nodded. "Standard protocol. Missing scout ship activates automatic distress beacon. Response team will investigate." Alan processed this information. "So we've got my government looking for you, and your people potentially coming to find you too. Great." They continued moving, staying under the thickest parts of the forest canopy to avoid being spotted from above. The helicopter sounds occasionally grew closer, then faded again as the search pattern moved away from them. Finally, they reached the lookout tower. It stood on a rocky outcrop, a wooden structure about 40 feet tall with a small room at the top. The stairs creaked as they climbed, but the tower seemed stable despite its age. The room at the top was dusty but intact, with windows on all sides offering a 360-degree view of the surrounding forest. Alan closed the trapdoor through which they had climbed and sat down on the floor, breathing heavily from the long hike. "We should be safe here for a while," he said. "Not many people know about this place anymore." Zarvik moved to the windows, looking out at the vast forest stretching in all directions. In the far distance, he could see the lights of a small town. Above, the night sky was clear, stars twinkling in patterns both familiar and strange to him. "My home is up there," Zarvik said quietly, pointing to a faint star. "Many light years away," Alan joined him at the window. "Do you miss it?" "Yes, but ... Zarvik seemed to struggle with what he wanted to say. "Your world, not what I expected. Not just danger and death, beauty too, complexity." They stood in silence for a moment, watching as a helicopter searchlight swept through a distant part of the forest. "I need to repair a communication device," Zarvik said finally. "Contact my people before they send military response." "Military response?" Alan looked alarmed. "What would that involve?" Zarvik hesitated. "Standard protocol for contaminated agent on Deathworld. Containment team. Quarantine zone. Sometimes ... sterilization." "Sterilization?" Alan's voice rose. "You mean they'd kill everyone? Not full planet?" "Small area only to prevent spread of contamination." Zarvik saw the horror on Alan's face and quickly added, "But can prevent. If I make contact, explain humans not as dangerous as believed." Alan ran a hand through his hair, trying to process this information. "So we're caught between my government Who wants to capture you for who knows what purpose, and your people who might sterilize the area if they think you've been contaminated by humans. Perfect. Zarvek set his pack down and began removing components for his communication device. Need specific parts from crashed ship, some materials not in emergency kit. So we need to go back to the crash site, Alan said, which is probably being watched by now. Yes, risky but necessary. As they discussed their options, Buck suddenly began growling again. Alan moved to the trapdoor, listening. Faint sounds of someone climbing the tower stairs reached them. Someone's coming, Alan whispered. He readied his rifle, pointing it at the trapdoor. The footsteps grew closer, then stopped just below. There was a soft knock. Ranger Carter, are you up there? I'm not with them. I want to help. It was a woman's voice. Alan and Zarvek exchanged glances. Who are you? Alan called out. My name is Dr. Susan Miller. I'm a xenobiologist. I've been tracking your alien friend since his ship crashed. I'm alone, and I think I can help you both. Zarvek readied his stunner. Alan positioned himself to the side of the trapdoor, then nodded. Come up slowly. Any sudden moves, and you'll regret it. The trapdoor lifted, and a woman in her 40s with short gray hair climbed into the room. She wore hiking clothes and carried a small backpack. Her eyes widened when she saw Zarvek. Remarkable, she whispered. Then noticing Alan's rifle and Zarvek's stunner, she slowly raised her hands. I'm not armed. I've been following your trail ever since you escaped the cabin. I broke away from the main search team. They don't know I'm here. Why should we trust you? Alan demanded. Susan looked directly at Zarvek. Because I believe first contact should be about communication and understanding, not capture and experimentation. And because I think you're going to need an ally with scientific credentials if you want to stop this situation from getting worse. Dawn broke over the forest as Alan, Zarvek, and Dr. Susan Miller made their way carefully toward the crash site. They had spent the night at the lookout tower, sharing information and forming a plan. Susan had proven her intentions by showing them classified documents on her tablet. The government knew about the crash and wanted the alien technology, but they weren't sure if Zarvek had survived. They've set up a perimeter around the ship, Susan explained as they paused behind a ridge overlooking the crash site. 24 agents, scientific team, military backup. Through a pair of binoculars, Alan could see people in hazmat suits examining the damaged scout ship. Others in black tactical gear patrolled the area. They had erected temporary structures and equipment around the site. Too many, Zarvek said. Cannot reach ship? Susan pointed to the east. There's a shift change at 8:00 hours. Brief window when the perimeter might be thinner. Even then, we'd need a distraction, Alan added. Buck, who had been sitting quietly beside them, suddenly raised his head and looked skyward. A moment later they all heard it, a faint humming sound growing louder. Helicopter? Alan asked. Evek shook his head, his expression a mixture of relief and concern. No, scout ship. My people, they watched as a sleek craft, similar to Zarvek's but larger, descended through the clouds. Its metallic hull shimmered in the morning light. The reaction below was immediate. Agents scrambled for cover, weapons were raised, and orders were shouted. This complicates things, Susan muttered. The new alien ship hovered above the crash site, scanning with visible beams of light. Then a voice boomed from it, speaking in Zarvek's language before switching to rough English. Attention, Earth inhabitants. We are seeking our lost crew member. Return him unharmed or face consequences. Susan pulled out her satellite phone. I need to call my superiors. This is about to get very bad. She stepped away to make the call. Zarvek turned to Alan, his expression grave. Standard first contact. Protocol will escalate if no response. Below, someone was attempting to communicate with the ship using a megaphone. The ship responded by firing an energy pulse into an empty area of the forest, obliterating several trees and leaving a smoking crater. Warning shot, Zarvek explained. Next target will be human structures. Alan made a quick decision. We need to reveal ourselves, now, before this gets worse. Susan returned, looking worried. My superiors want to try capturing the new ship. Military units are being deployed. That would be disastrous, Zarvik said. Their weapons far superior. Alan stood up. I'm going down there. Zarvik, you should come too. Susan, can you create a distraction on the far side? Susan nodded. I can trigger some of the seismic sensors they've placed. It'll draw attention away temporarily. They split up, with Susan circling around to the far side of the perimeter. Alan and Zarvak waited until they heard shouts of alarm as sensors triggered. On the opposite side, then they moved quickly toward the edge of the clearing. Stop, a voice commanded as they emerged from the trees. Two agents pointed weapons at them. Alan raised his hands. We need to talk to whoever's in charge right now. Before people start dying. The agents hesitated, then one spoke into his radio. A moment later, a senior-looking man in a suit approached, flanked by security. I'm Director Paul Wilson, Department of Special Research. You've created quite a situation, Ranger Carter. This is about to become an international incident if you don't listen, Alan replied. Zarvik needs to communicate with his people before they decide to show us what their weapons can really do. The alien ship still hovered menacingly above. Its weapons visibly charged and ready. Wilson looked at Zarvik with intense curiosity. So this is our visitor? You speak English? Yes, Zarvik replied. Must speak to my people, prevent conflict. A tense moment passed as Wilson considered his options. Finally he nodded. Do it, but we'll be monitoring everything. Zarvik stepped forward into the clearing, clearly visible to the ship above. He raised his arms in a specific gesture and called out in his native language. The ship lowered slightly and a beam of light scanned him. A voice responded from the ship, speaking in the alien language. Zarvik replied at length, occasionally gesturing toward Alan and the humans around them. The conversation continued for several minutes. What's he saying? Wilson asked Alan. I have no idea, Alan admitted. But I think he's trying to explain that we're not the monsters his people think we are. Finally, the ship landed in the clearing. A door opened, and three aliens similar to Zarvik emerged, wearing what appeared to be military uniforms. Wilson ordered his people to lower their weapons as the aliens approached. The lead alien spoke, their words translated by a device similar to Zarvik's. I am Commander Nexville of the Zentari Exploration Fleet. Our scout Zarvik has shared interesting information about your species? Wilson stepped forward. Director Paul Wilson, representing the United States government, we welcome peaceful contact. Nexville's vertical pupils narrowed. Zarvik claims humans are not as dangerous as our records indicate. He has requested we revise our classification of your planet. We can be dangerous when threatened, Wilson admitted. But we prefer peace and cooperation. As the formal introductions continued, Alan found himself standing beside Zarvik. Did I get you in trouble? Alan asked quietly. Zarvik made a sound that might have been a laugh. Yes, breaking many protocols, but making history too. First peaceful contact with Deathworld species. Susan joined them, looking relieved. My superiors have agreed to diplomatic approach. No weapons testing, no technology seizures without consent. They watched as human and alien leaders began cautious negotiations. What had started as a potential disaster was turning into something unprecedented, the beginning of diplomatic relations between Earth and the wider galactic community. They will reclassify Earth, Zarvik told Alan. Not Deathworld, just High Challenge World. I'll take that as a compliment, Alan replied with a smile. Nexville approached them. Scout Zarvik, preparations are being made for your return? Zarvik hesitated, looking at Alan and Susan. Request permission to remain. As cultural liaison. Continue studying humans, the commander seemed surprised. Highly irregular, but he looked at the humans with something like curiosity. These are irregular circumstances. I will consider your request. As the commander walked away, Alan turned to Zarvik. You want to stay? Much to learn, Zarvik replied. Much to teach. First Zentari to truly understand humans. Important work. Susan grinned. I could use a research partner with your perspective. The scientific community is going to have a field day with this. As the sun rose higher over the forest, human and alien teams began working together to secure the area and establish proper communication channels. What had begun as a terrifying crash landing on a supposed death world had transformed into the most significant moment in human history. Buck sat beside Alan, watching it all with canine curiosity. Zarvek reached down hesitantly and for the first time patted the dog's head. Buck's tail wagged happily. "Perhaps," Zarvik said, "not everything on Earth is dangerous after all." Alan laughed. "Just wait until you try pizza. That's when you'll really understand humans." In the distance, more vehicles arrived, bringing scientists, diplomats, and media. Earth's first official contact with alien life had begun, all because a scout ship crashed in the wrong place at exactly the right time.